we are starting a bit late. Mr. Munjal, Mr. Naveen Munjal, the managing director of Hero Motor Electric Vehicles. He has been unfortunately stuck in traffic. And I think since most of us are from Delhi, we connect with that situation. We have been there, sometime or the other. We are starting a bit late. Mr. Munjal, Mr. Naveen Munjal, the managing director of Hero Motor Electric Vehicles. He has been for this man to stop. Well, so Mr. Munjal was gracious enough to agree to address from the car. That's the best thing that can be done at the moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to this renewed, exciting start to the conference. Let me hand over to Mr. Naveen Munjal.
Good morning, everybody. My sincere apologies for this. I didn't realize that there is a traffic advisory out today because of the local elections, and there are traffic jams all over the place. So I've been stuck in the car for about an hour and a half now. So my sincere apologies for this. Now, if I just talk about electric vehicles, which is what I was supposed to talk when I came there. So I've been in this space now for 15 odd years. And in this 15 years, when we formed the company, we knew that the market is going to electrify at some point of time. We just didn't know when it's going to electrify. The changes that I'm seeing in the last 2 years are far greater than what I'd seen in the 15 years prior to that. So there is a dramatic shift which is happening towards e-mobility, and that's happening across sectors. So whether you look at it from a two-wheeler perspective, you look at it from a three-wheeler perspective, cars, or even public transport. The government agenda was to get two-wheelers and public transport and three-wheelers on the roads. That's what India moved on. We have a very, 85% of the market for the consumer market is a two-wheeler market. And a large part of that is the commuter segment. And that's what we've been targeting. So in the last few years, there are dramatic shifts happening. There are dramatic changes that we are seeing in the way that people commute, in the way that people buy mobile vehicles and other forms of e-commerce deliveries, etc. So some of the large changes which have been there is the ecosystem has now begun to get developed, which wasn't really there in the last few years. So in the 2 to 3 years back, if I spoke about this, there was a big challenges, whether it was financing, it was the ecosystem, the charging infrastructure, it was the awareness in the market, etc. Now, some of those factors have been taken care of. So financing has improved dramatically in the last few years. Awareness is at an all-time high. It has never been this good for this electric vehicle sector in the last number of years, whether it is from the two-wheeler perspective or from the cars or any other forms of vehicles. When we consider the supply chains, which has been a big challenge to start with, because the volumes weren't there. Now those have begun to fall in place in the last 2 years or so. And plus, of course, give it the huge push that we are getting the tailwinds from the government. So we have a FAME policy in place, which is FAME 2. Now, this policy, while it's scheduled to go on till March of 2024, we will actually run out of it well before that. So we anticipate by July, August of next year of 23, we're actually going to hit the 1 million unit mark in the two-wheeler segment. And then hopefully we will come up with a FAME 3 policy. Besides that, the government has also set the PLI policy in place. Now, the PLI is there for manufacturing of vehicles. There is a PLI for batteries, which has been oversubscribed. And there is a PLI for the chips, which is again being worked on at this point of time. So very strong tailwinds when it comes from the central governments. Besides the central governments, there are a number of state governments which have the policies in place. So there's about 18 states which have different forms of policies in place. Now, whether those are to do with the manufacturing of vehicles in their state or it's even to sell the vehicles in their state. Now, what is required is that we are required to, now we should put our mandates in place on where the market should electrify, since there's conversion already happening. This year, the conversion rate, which was earlier about 1.5% of the total two-wheeler market, is going to be about close to 5% this year. So that's the kind of jump that we are seeing. We anticipate in the next few years, by 2027, this number will be a minimum of about 40 to 50%, which means anything from about 10 to 12 million units of electric vehicles, up from about 600,000 this year, which was about 300,000 last year. So that's the kind of growth that you're going to see. When you talk within some of the government circles and within one of the policymakers, etc., the number that we could achieve by even 2030 is way beyond 80% for the two-wheelers. Now, that is a significant numbers because what that requires is a very, very large, robust manufacturing system to come into place, very robust supply chains to come into place. So when we look at the technology evolution, how technology is going to evolve, right now we are on lithium-ion batteries, whether it's an NMC or it's a LFP, etc. But what is going to happen really is that we are going to start seeing other forms of batteries coming in, whether it's zinc or it's solid states or aluminum. There's a lot of talk about hydrogen fuel cell, for example. Hydrogen fuel cell will probably come into the larger forms of vehicles to start with, and then trickle down to the smaller vehicles. But when you look at the overall mobility sector at this point of time, one thing is very, very clear that we are going to move away from any emission vehicles, tailpipe emissions. We are going to move towards zero emission vehicles. And there is really no R&D at a global level which is happening on any vehicles which are emission vehicles. So very clearly, we are going to move towards zero emission, and that is what is required for multiple factors. When we look at it from a climatic standpoint, we are signatories to the 2070 Accord, which talks about zero emission or net zero by 2070. And when you start working backwards, mobility is one of the sectors which really needs to work at this point of time. We can't really afford to wait. When you look at it, consider it from an environmental standpoint. We've got our AQI levels in Delhi are already, even right now, are already close to about 400 levels. Now, in most parts of the world, those would be inhuman levels. And coupled with COVID, which we've just addressed, we've just had, that has a beating on us. Takes a beating on our lungs. So COVID plus the PM 2.5 that we've got is not a very good idea. So we have to move, and beyond that, all of that, a very important factor is the economics. So now electric vehicles, because of the subsidies, because of the support that we are getting, are at similar price to that of an entry-level two-wheeler, and even in cars. And when you consider the TCO, the total cost of running or the total cost of ownership, that is extremely low. So it's about 1/10 that of an IC engine vehicle. So from an environmental standpoint, we have to move there. From a climatic standpoint, we have to move there. And it helps from an economic standpoint as well. So the conversion is happening at a very, very fast pace now, already happening. Now, when we look at it, how the markets are going to evolve. So there is going to be a B2B market. There is a B2C market, which is a very important one, where you have the dealerships and whether you sell online or offline. So there is a physical plus a digital platforms which are already working. There is a very large amount of the service network that we're already establishing. So we call it the PGOs, the private garage owners. We've already trained about 8,000 of them, which is how we are creating that whole ecosystem. Besides that, there's a large amount of infrastructure that we've already put in place for charging. Now that is expanding very, very rapidly now. So we've already installed about 4,000 charging stations, and there's about 40,000 more which are going to be installed over the next 2.5 years or so. Now, a large part of this is going to be done in partnership with companies which weren't really there in the race earlier, but now this market is becoming significant. So when you look at it from a pyramid structure, the base of that pyramid is going to be two-wheelers, because that's what India commutes on, and that is where the maximum amount of savings are. That is going to create the large volumes, basis which the other forms are going to actually make significant returns for the other forms. So 3 for the cars and public transport, everything. But you really need to get a strategy right when it comes to the two-wheeler sector. That is a very, very important sector for India. So very strong tailwinds, very, very strong supply chains falling in place now. What is missing in this whole segment at this point is things like batteries and chip shortage, etc. Those are some challenges which exist right now. Also, when you consider the kind of growth that's happening, of course, when the growth is there, there are some challenges which are there. The supply chains have to fall in place, and there is a lag between the demand and supply at times, because it's a manufacturing-led, it's a production-led growth that we are seeing here. And for that to fall in place, you've got to put your supply chains in place, your dealer network in place, your service network in place, and the product has to be robust enough. It's one thing to manufacture a few thousand vehicles, and it's another thing to manufacture a few million vehicles. And so putting those systems in place is extremely important. But now I'm confident that, when you look at it from a perspective of the country and the requirements, etc., I am extremely confident that the path ahead is absolutely electric. It is zero emission, tailpipe zero emissions, and which is what is required for most of our urban centers. we are following a hockey stick growth already. Now, this hockey stick growth is going to continue for the near foreseeable future, and it's only going to expand from here on. So I am confident that the world ahead for us, India, the future is bright, it's electric, and the future is green. And we will find that this market converts much faster than any of us are anticipating. And that's something that we've been waiting for a long time. So thank you so much. I am again so sorry that I'm not there in person at the conference. I'm stuck somewhere on the road somewhere, so I've just parked and just doing this virtually the best that I can at this point.
Thank you, Mr.
So thank you
Munjal.
for having me.
Let's give a huge round of applause to Mr. Munjal for being entrepreneurial, making way for this from the road. One of its kind, so it's an interesting start for the day. Mr. Munjal.